I appreciate that gracious introduction, Rudy. You know what the definition or the difference between a professional and a non-professional? A professional is paid to be good, while a non-professional can be good for nothing. So actually I'm good for nothing. Well, good morning to you. I want to wish you a happy 2010. I'm sure that others have done that as well, but I want to continue that. This has been an exciting time for all of us. I appreciate the fact that when we came here 6 years ago, that this church graciously adopted us into the fellowship, and basically from the first day that we were here, we never felt like strangers. A lot of time when I go around and introduce myself and ask people if they're here for the first time, they say, oh no, we've been members here for 20 years. So if I ask you that in the next months or so, you'll know that I'm the one that's the stranger, and I'm only trying to figure out who goes and who doesn't go. But like I said, this is a great time. This is a beautiful building. I remember the first time that I preached here. I had my notes, and we were out in the, well, actually we were in the old building, but they had the fans, you know, across the top. And so I came in and I had all my notes, and I put them out here so carefully, and I started to speak. And about that time, one of the fans blew across my notes, and I never recovered. So even though we're in a great new building with great air conditioning, I've got it all tied down today. So I want to thank all those that have been a part of seeing this building come together. Fortunately, nobody asked me to help build anything, or we would have been in trouble. But a lot of people have done a lot of work to get this to this point here. And I'm sure there's a lot more that needs to be done. But beyond that, 2010 has another auspicious part to it. And that's the fact that you all get to choose a new pastor. Hopefully it'll be in 2010. But the thing about choosing a new pastor is, fortunately, it doesn't come very often. When I was working for a seminary, part of the problem that I had is working with congregations who were trying to select a new pastor, and because, for the most part, it didn't happen very often, they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to go about the process because they had never done this before. And it's exciting that it's been 17, 18 years since Pastor Ray came, and you've never had to deal with that. So I hope all of us are praying for the Pastoral Search Committee as they go through this process, as they learn what it's going to take to choose this new pastor. But as we read in the meditation, as you heard it read, the exciting thing about choosing a new pastor, or even seeing this church grow, is the fact that it's not our responsibility. It's God's. Jesus said in Matthew 16 that I will build my church. Now, contrary to popular opinion, when Peter blurted out, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God," and Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, because I'm going to build my church on what you said, not who you are." Peter was not the first pope. Well, he wasn't the first pope. But God was not going to build his church on Peter, on one person. He was going to use many people, living stones. Ephesians chapter 4 talks about the fact that God is building his church. There's a foundation that was laid with the apostle. Christ was the cornerstone, and we are the living stones that God is going to use to build his church, his spiritual church. Not a physical building, In a sense, this is not Jesus' church. This is a building. We are Jesus' church. God is building, Jesus is building His church one stone at a time. Now, I'd like for you to turn in your Bibles, if you have them, to Colossians chapter 1. And we're going to look at some of the elements that God uses to build His church. Because as we look at this, we realize that these two elements, there are two major elements that God uses. He uses godly leadership to build His church. Ephesians 4 says that God has given pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints to do the work of ministry. Now, you'll notice if you look at chapter 4 of Ephesians, that it wasn't the pastors and the teachers who were going to do the work of ministry. He's using the pastors and teachers to equip the saints who are to do the work of the ministry. So as you're looking for a new pastor, you need to be careful that you don't think of it as a hired gun, a professional who's paid to be good, and the rest of us can sit around and watch him do his thing. So, first of all, choosing a new pastor at this point is out of our control. God has a man out there, a godly man that He wants to use to equip you to do the work of ministry. So, while God is preparing His man to come to you, you need to make sure you're preparing yourself to receive this man. It would be terrible for God to bring in His man and we're not prepared. It's like a single person. They desire to be married and they're looking around for this perfect person out there and they can't seem to find them. And in reality, the reason they can't find him or her is because they're not the perfect person themselves. There's a proverb that says, "He who finds a friend must first himself be friendly." If you want a friend, you've got to be friendly. If we want a godly pastor, we have got to be a godly people in order for God, who is building His church, to bring that person to you. So, during these months, while the pulpit committee is doing their thing, we need to make sure that we're doing our thing, of preparing ourselves to receive this godly man. So, turn in your Bibles, as I said, to Colossians chapter 1. And Colossians is an exciting book. Colossae was 100 miles east of Ephesus in the Ephesian church. The Ephesian church was the flagship of church. Paul had spent 3 years there. They were godly, they were mature, they were the crown jewel of the churches of Asia Minor. And then there was little Colossae over here in the Lycus Valley, a very insignificant podunk church. And yet Paul is writing to this little church. Now there are some reasons for him writing this letter. And it's interesting that there are 4 letters that were written by Paul from prison. They're called the prison epistles. 3 of these are about to be taken by a man by the name of Tychicus, a trusted servant and fellow worker of Paul. Paul is in prison. It's early 660 AD. It's getting time for travel again. You remember in Acts chapter 27 that it says that they were all fearful that it was too late to travel by sea.